It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Welcome to my listeners here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio, and also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live and the other Facebook Live channels that we have up and running now. You can comment live if you'd like, or you can call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, and tell me what's on your mind and participate in the show today. If you'd like to listen to some prior podcasts of the show, read my columns on Western Journal and the American Thinker, or Penn Live, or to take a look at some great show merchandise, you can take a look at our website, themarkscaringishow.com. Site, or you can subscribe to our show on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Mark Scaringi. Join us on Facebook. Earlier this week, the Democratic presidential candidates appeared on CNN's Climate Town Hall. It was 7 hours of various CNN talking head personalities, Anderson Cooper, Chris Cuomo, and others, interviewing the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. The topic, obviously, climate change, and apparently CNN wanted to focus on that particular issue, climate change, because apparently the Democratic National Committee that sponsors the presidential debates has chosen not to do a debate focused on that particular issue. So CNN steps in, I guess, as an adjunct of the Democratic Party and Democratic presidential candidates who want to talk about climate change and focus a whole program on that issue. Well, the Democratic contenders, they laid out plans costing anywhere from about $1 trillion, that's Mayor Pete Buttigieg's, to $16 trillion, the United States Senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, in direct federal spending on climate change initiatives over the next decade. About half of the candidates have already endorsed the Green New Deal proposed by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a Democrat from New York, and United States Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts. Various estimates. Now, it's only a resolution. It's not actually a bill, but it proposes an outline for bills to be introduced in the House and the Senate. Some have estimated the cost to be as much as $90 trillion to implement the Green New Deal. And if you watched CNN's Climate Town Hall, it was 7 hours, lots of candidates, the big focus on how climate change is destroying the world, and where all of the candidates have bought into this idea that our own president, President Trump, believes is fake science, the climate hoax, as the president refers to it. But we had some really interesting points, comments, statements made by these Democratic presidential candidates, the kind of statements made that should scare the bejesus out of the American people with what these presidential candidates are pledging to do if they are voted into office. Former Vice President Joe Biden, apparently the most news he made on the Climate Town Hall, I guess, is that his left eye was infused with blood, and so he was having some sort of medical issue during the Climate Town Hall, and that generated a lot of news and increased speculation as to whether the former vice president has the health and stamina to run and to win and to run the nation as our president. So in addition to his rhetorical gaffes that he often makes on the campaign trail, and concern about whether or not he has the mental stability to be president. He recently declared that he's not nuts, so he's reassuring us that he has the mental stability. Also, some health concerns about the former vice president. He's 76 years old. So that generated a lot of interest, coverage in the news. But I think that we need to focus on what the former vice president was saying about what he would do with regard to climate change if he is elected president. At one point during his 40, they each had 40 minutes, and at one point during his part of the program, he said we could take millions of vehicles off the road if we have high-speed rail. So there, the former Vice President Biden is kind of reaching back to President Barack Obama's high-speed rail plans. But they were just plans. So they really have gone nowhere they went nowhere when Democrats controlled the White House and the Congress. And so why would we believe that a President Biden could achieve or implement this high-speed rail plan when President Obama couldn't get it done? The Democratic Congress couldn't get it done. And apparently those liberal states that are advocating it, such as California, they can't get it done. So there's just no reason to believe that this notion that we can take millions of vehicles off the road and replace it with high-speed rail has any chance of ever being put into effect. California, by the way, has spent about a decade now and billions of federal, state, and local taxpayer dollars, and they've really made effectively no progress on their high-speed rail project. And even if it does get built, why would anyone think that it's going to bring about a meaningful change that's beneficial to the environment? High-speed rail itself uses significant amounts of energy and causes significant environmental damage on its own. So that's Joe Biden. And we'll talk more about some of the things that Joe Biden said. Elizabeth Warren, the United States Senator from Massachusetts, who really has been surging in the polls and is one of the top three contenders now for the Democratic presidential nomination with Biden, Warren, and Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren, she warns we only have 11 years to cut our emissions in half. And she said, in my administration, we won't be able to build new nuclear plants. We'll start weaning ourselves off nuclear and replace it with renewables. Now, first of all, does anybody believe that will ever happen, that we're going to run this massive United States economy on solar and wind? It's nothing more than a pipe dream. But secondly, Warren is talking about shutting down nuclear energy. Now, nuclear, remember, is much cleaner than fossil fuels. It's much cleaner than coal and oil and even natural gas. Now, and Elizabeth Warren, she wants to get away from nuclear, even though it's so clean compared to the other energy that we use to move our nation. She wants to replace it with wind and solar. And there's one environmental researcher, Michael Schellenberger, who's done a report that concludes that solar panels, and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and the Democratic presidential candidates, they love solar. They love solar panels. Solar panels produce 300 times more waste for the amount of energy created than do nuclear plants. Yet that fact is just ignored by Elizabeth Warren and others who talk about how they're going to ban, prohibit, get rid of nuclear and replace it with solar. Yet it creates so much more waste compared to the amount of energy it produces. Kamala Harris, United States Senator from California, she made some very interesting claims about plastic straws and red meat, which we'll talk about when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking today about the CNN Climate Town Hall that occurred on September 4th, just a few days ago. 7 hours of broadcasting dedicated to climate change and ferreting out the various policy proposals of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. They've all bought into this, what the president believes is a hoax, this climate change hoax, and based upon fake science, as our president has declared. And we're going through some of the policy proposals of the leading contenders, and you're welcome to call in and let us know what you think about the climate change proposals of these leading Democratic presidential candidates. You're welcome to comment live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We have one comment from one of our viewers about residential solar panels catching fire. That's true. That was in the news just a few days ago. So there are all kinds of collateral consequences to these solar panels, and researchers conclude that that nuclear power produces so much more energy than solar, comparatively speaking, and solar takes up huge swaths of real estate, of land that is cordoned off and taken away from nature. And dedicated to creating solar energy, and it's so wasteful. Solar panels produce 300 times more waste for the amount of energy created than do nuclear plants. Nevertheless, most of these Democratic presidential candidates, they want to get away from or ban, prohibit, eliminate nuclear. Kamala Harris, United States Senator from California, she wants to ban plastic straws and red meat. And that's how she's going to combat this climate change. So no more cheeseburgers for you, no more cheeseburgers for me. What do you think about that? Will you forego cheeseburgers for the rest of your life, forever, in order to facilitate United States Senator Kamala Harris's plan that by giving up cheeseburgers that Americans seem to enjoy quite a bit, that's going to save the earth from climate catastrophe that's caused by our eating too many cheeseburgers? And how about these plastic straws? You know, if you talk to any school-aged child, they will tell you that plastic straws are destroying the environment, they're destroying the earth. The earth is going under because we're using plastic straws, and they say we've got to replace plastic straws with paper straws. And then ask them the follow-up question: where do you think they get the paper from to make the paper straws? Think about how many billions of trees they're going to cut down, destroying the environment, destroying forests around the world, destroying, how about the Amazon rainforest that seems to be front and center in the attention of our green Democratic friends? Will have to consume billions of trees, destroying the environment in order to make these paper straws. But those types of things, I guess, our Democratic presidential candidates aren't really thinking about. And Kamala Harris is also pledging to end fracking. Now, of course, Pennsylvania has gone through an economic rebirth, so to speak, because of the fracking industry here, and it produces a lot of natural gas. And Pennsylvania is helping lead America back to the place that it once held many, many decades ago as the leading producer of energy. And America is now energy independent. Once again, we no longer are dependent upon the Middle East for our energy, largely due to natural gas and fracking. Yet Kamala Harris wants to end fracking in Pennsylvania, end fracking in America. And remember, it's natural gas. And the fracking is what helps us bring up all of this natural gas. That has actually helped lower U.S. greenhouse gas emissions to record low levels. Remember many years ago, the green liberals in the Democratic Party, Al Gore and others, were all about greenhouse emissions and how that is destroying America, destroying the world. Yet natural gas has reduced greenhouse emissions. But now we have our Democratic friends, they want to get rid of natural gas, get rid of fracking, even though it has done so much good to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Well, And by the way, paper products, with regard to eliminating plastic straws that our Kamala Harris and our other presidential candidates want to do, paper products take more energy and effort to produce than plastic straws do. So we're going to be using more energy. And our Democratic friends, they hate energy. They think energy is causing the end of the world and some sort of climate catastrophe. But we use more energy to produce paper straws than we do plastic straws. And by the way, these paper straws, they get stuffed into landfills, and they don't degrade in the landfill. They just kind of mummify there. So this is not the answer. And by the way, there was a story in Iowa. An Iowa landfill the operators are getting pretty upset with a wind farm because those massive turbines on the blades on the windmills, well, they wear out after 10, 11, 12 years. And so where do those massive blades go? Well, they go to landfills. And they're not biodegradable. So this wind energy that's being promoted as the solution to this climate catastrophe that awaits us all in just 10 or 11 years, it has massive consequences to the environment. The blades from the windmills loading up our landfills, causing more environmental damage. And paper straws, well, they cost about 8 times more to make than plastic straws. So the price of any soda or any drink that you get in any restaurant or a convenience store or grocery store is going to go up if you're purchasing paper straws. And if plastic straws are banned, then you're going to have no alternative. These ideas are not grounded in common sense. But nevertheless, that's kind of not an issue for those who are promoting them. But I'll tell you, some of the other things that these Democratic presidential candidates were saying, and some of the things that the audience members were saying, some of the questions from the audience members, who are all selected because they have this very liberal green mentality or ideology, if you will, are truly scary. At one point during the town hall, this young man, Isaac Larkin, a 27-year-old PhD candidate from Northwestern, he asked former Vice President Joe Biden, how can we trust you to hold these corporations and executives accountable for their crimes against humanity? When we know that tomorrow you're holding a high-dollar fundraiser hosted by Andrew Goldman, a fossil fuel executive. So this young man, a PhD candidate of what we don't know, they didn't say, he's accusing fossil fuel executives of committing crimes against humanity. His target, Andrew Goldman, he once owned and managed a natural gas company. So if you work in a natural gas company, or perhaps if you use natural gas to heat your home or maybe cook your food, you're committing a crime against humanity. I mean, that's pretty serious stuff. And what did Joe Biden say in response? Well, he didn't admonish the young man for using that phrase, crimes against humanity. He just tried to defend himself by saying, oh, well, Mr. Goldman's not a fossil fuel executive, which is obviously a lie. He was. He ran a natural gas company. He's retired now. So I guess Biden is saying, well, he's a retired fossil fuel executive. And then, of course, later, after the CNN town hall, Biden did go to New York, flew, of course, using all kinds of massive amounts of energy and carbon emissions to fly to his fundraiser, where he received lots of money from this fossil fuel executive and his friends. But Biden's climate plan, that sets a goal of getting the United States to 100% renewable energy by 2050. The plan cites human activity, including the burning of fossil fuels like natural gas, as contributing to the greenhouse gas effect, that it's exacerbating climate events and playing a part in the overall increase in global temperature. And according to Biden, unless otherwise halted, the United States or the world will confront climate catastrophe unless we halt fossil fuel use and replace it entirely with renewable energy. Now, of course, that will never happen. The natural gas, just natural gas itself, is projected to provide the majority of electricity in the United States by 2050, according to the Union of Concerned Scientists. And it currently provides about 35% of electricity generated in the United States. And there's no way that amount of energy production that's produced by natural gas can be replaced by solar and wind. There's no realistic conclusion that can be done. So these are just pipe dreams being promoted by these Democratic presidential candidates. They want to do away with fossil fuels. That's what moves this economy. That's what we use to put gas in our car, to heat our homes. That's what this country, our schools, our churches, our hospitals, that's what it runs on. I mean, this is just scary, scary stuff. And by the way, the United States is the only country in the world that has reduced its emissions over the past decade and a half while still having a growing economy. And in part, a big reason for that is the hydraulic fracturing, the fracking that these Democratic presidential candidates want to ban, like now. That's kind of a scary thing. It really is. And think of that phrase, crime against humanity. Those of us who are using oil or coal or natural gas to live our lives, we're committing crimes against humanity, according to these Democrats. Scary stuff. We'll talk more about the CNN Climate Town Hall when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we put America first. We're talking about the CNN Climate Town Hall of just a few days ago and the statements and policy proposals made by the leading contenders for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. They all seem to buy into what the president refers to as this climate hoax and this fake science that's driving these environmental policies. Many, I think half of the candidates have signed on to the Green New Deal proposed by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a Democrat of New York, who a year or two ago was a bartender, and now she is a congresswoman and is leading the country to support and put into effect her Green New Deal, which will pretty much end fossil fuels in America, make us all reliant upon solar and wind with a cost of about $90 trillion. So you're going to have to give up your car, give up just about every type of energy source that actually works. And you're going to have to, I guess, use the wind currents, maybe take a sailboat to work. We'll see how that works. But I'm talking about one of the comments made by the questioners in the audience, a 27-year-old PhD student who believes that if you run an energy company or work in an energy company, let's say you work in the fracking industry here in Pennsylvania, that you are committing a crime against humanity by bringing natural gas up from under the earth, putting it into a pipe, and then piping it to a home or a business so that they can heat the home, provide heat or air conditioning or energy to propel the stove so you can cook your meal. These are kind of basic things, right? Fossil fuel driven energy production is how we survive as human beings. Yet our friends in the Democratic Party, they want to end all fossil fuel as a source of our energy and replace it with things that can't produce nearly what we need to live the lives that we have become accustomed to, and that in their own create all different kinds of collateral consequences, to negative consequences to the environment. But it's that crimes against humanity thing, that's scary stuff, because that I can just picture these young men and women college graduates or college students or PhD, master's, PhD students who are so infused with this kind of left-wing green ideology. I can picture them on the streets, kind of storming the barricades, if you will. They sound almost Leninist. They sound like modern-day Bolsheviks with that crimes against humanity stuff, because who knows where that can lead? I mean, we as students of history, we know where that kind of talk has led before. That's kind of on your way to violence and destruction and violently attacking and eliminating those people who you consider committing crimes against humanity. That's serious stuff. Of course, Biden, he just ignores that statement. He probably doesn't even know what that means or the consequences of that. But it's a little scary. How about another exchange? This one from a retired school teacher and administrator. He asked Julian Castro if it was fair to ask future generations to procreate. He called it the cycle of family due to the world's chaotic climate change that apparently we've created and have done little to address. So this retired school teacher and administrator is saying young people should not procreate. They shouldn't bring babies into this world because the world's going to end due to some sort of climate catastrophe caused by us. I mean, these people are hysterical. I mean, this is paranoia. And so if you're a young person and you're believing this stuff, you're not going to procreate. You're not going to have babies. We're not going to continue the human civilization, life on this earth, out of fear that somehow the earth is going to end in 11 years. This is crazy, crazy stuff. All the candidates are saying that carbon emissions are killing us. And Julian Castro and just about every Democratic presidential candidate is talking. It says that climate change is an existential threat to life on Earth. Really, an existential threat to life on Earth. Real scary stuff. Now, and by the way, as a little side note, if you will, Town Hall published a report based on dioxide by the CNN Town Hall television event itself. So you'll have to Google this and get on the Town Hall site. And CNN's climate change Town Hall production will create roughly 57 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So CNN itself and all of those wonderful Democratic presidential candidates themselves were creating 57 tons of carbon dioxide emission just to produce that 7-hour TV special. So it poses the question, is CNN committing crimes against humanity? Because, by the way, that energy production that went into CNN's climate change town hall didn't come from solar or wind. Trust me. So, in any event, and then it was opened. The whole program was opened up by Wolf Blitzer of CNN, talking head, and now I guess he's a scientist, and he's just kind of repeating these liberal talking points about climate change, and he starts the show by asserting that Hurricane Dorian was caused by climate change. He says we're seeing firsthand the effects of climate change. A powerful Atlantic hurricane is sitting right now off the coast of Florida. So now hurricanes, and hurricanes, by the way, have been around since the creation of the earth. Hurricanes are now caused by climate change. And of course, that's just simply not true. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, reports after extensive review of the data and associated studies that the historical Atlantic hurricane frequency record does not provide compelling evidence for a substantial greenhouse warming-induced long-term increase. In fact, NOAA's model predicts there will be fewer Atlantic hurricanes. So, and the report goes on, it says, neither our model projections for the 21st century, it's all a lie. It's not true. That in and of itself should have been enough for you to turn the channel off. I couldn't. because I had to do the show today, so I had to have something to talk about. I've got to keep a close eye on these Democratic presidential candidates and call them out when they're wrong, which is just about every time. So, you're welcome to call in and tell me what you think about the CNN Climate Town Hall, what you think about Democratic presidential candidates' proposals to ban plastic straws, to ban red meat, ban cheeseburgers, ban fracking, ban oil, ban coal, and ban natural gas. That's the idea behind their proposals. Let's open up the phone lines, and we'll take some calls. We have Wendy. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. What do you think about the whole idea of banning plastic straws?
I think it's crazy. I'm curious whether or not any of them have ever drank out of a paper straw.
Well, that's a good point, because I don't know if you watched, but you can Google Kamala Harris, who proposed that we ban plastic straws in response to a question by Aaron Burnett. She kind of laughed and giggled nervously, saying, well, paper straws don't work because they fold over and they bend over and they're not effective at getting the liquid up out of the glass. So, in her own answer, she kind of backs into supporting plastic straws because that's the issue of the day. But yet she admits, well, paper straws don't do the job.
Well, and if they'd be honest about all of their proposals, they're not going to work.
No.
None of them.
No.
Yeah, it's crazy. And fortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to watch 7 hours of their baloney.
Well, what were you doing? Were you working or something like that?
No, I was ignoring it, quite honestly.
Well, hey, by the way, as I said, that 7 hours produced 57 tons of carbon dioxide. So don't get too close to that CNN Climate Town Hall debate. It could kill you.
Believe me, I won't. And another thing is the hamburgers. I will not give up a hamburger, number one. But number two, they are totally against any type of Christian affiliation, but yet do they realize that they're promoting Chick-fil-A when they say don't eat hamburgers?
Very good point. Very good point. Although their compatriots are up there in Toronto today, isn't it, doing like a die-in? I guess Chick-fil-A is being introduced into Canada, and it was today or tomorrow, and they're kind of doing a die-in there, and they've got blood on the ground, and they're showing that I guess by eating chicken, you're killing yourself. But Wendy, thanks for calling. Appreciate that. We've got to take a brief commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Now back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking today about the CNN Climate Town Hall, the 7-hour program that featured the 2020 presidential candidates who are seeking the nomination to challenge President Trump for his reelection bid in 2020, and how they're all on board with this whole Green New Deal program and this idea that fossil-based fossil fuel-based sources of energy are leading to a climate catastrophe. We have 10 or 11 or 12. The number varies according to our presidential candidates. 10, 11, 12 years to end fossil fuels, replace it entirely with renewable energy in order to save the world. So that's where we are. And we heard from Wendy, who's not giving up her cheeseburgers, and I'm with you. And she also was talking about how our liberal Democratic presidential friends are of course, waging war against Christianity, as they seem to do, but they're inadvertently supporting Chick-fil-A, because if we ban red meat, then we're all going to be eating chicken, I guess, and that's a great idea. And we're going to get a Chick-fil-A here in Camp Hill, where I live, hopefully soon, and I'm very excited about that. I love Chick-fil-A. Love what they have to eat there. It's very good. But Wendy also talked when she mentioned the kind of the Christian faith, and how our Democratic presidential candidates are ignoring it or working against it. We heard from Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Saint Pete. He talks about Christianity and the Christian faith. He said, "Let's talk in language that is understood." This is at the CNN Climate Town Hall. Let's talk in language that's understood across the heartland about faith. If you believe that God is watching as poison is being belched into the air of creation and people are being harmed by it, countries are at risk of vanishing in low-lying areas, what does God think of that? It's messed up. So that's Saint Pete Buttigieg, who is basically saying that you are anti-Christian and anti-God if you reject this whole climate change hoax that's being perpetrated and encouraged, promoted by these Democratic presidential candidates. And one response to St. Pete is, hello, carbon dioxide is not a poison. Remember, plants breathe in carbon dioxide, so to speak, and what do they produce with it? Oxygen. And this is like fifth grade science. And what do human beings do with oxygen? Well, they breathe it in. For what? For life. That's how we're alive, is we breathe oxygen. The carbon dioxide is what keeps us alive. We need CO2s or we'll all die. So this is madness being perpetrated by these climate deniers is what they really are. We'll talk more about the CNN town hall debate. I'll give you some more of my thoughts, but I want to open up the phone lines again. We'll take some more of your calls. We have Tina from York. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Tina.
This is an article I cut out of the paper a long time ago. I don't know why the environmentalists aren't having a fit about, I'm talking about wind turbines that are killing birds and bats. It says farmers may suffer if turbine use picks up. Bats are nature's pesticide, consume as many as 500 insects in 1 hour, 3,000 insects in one night. A colony of 100 little brown bats can consume 250,000 mosquitoes and other small insects in a night, and they've saved the farmers money, about $74 an acre. And in Pennsylvania, they said they saved the farmers $277.9 million in costs.
Wow, that's a great article. I wonder if you can tweet that to me or post it on my Facebook. I'd like to take a read. But
I don't do that. I'm 81 years old. I cut this out of my paper a long time ago, and it also says about what's going to happen if the farmers are forced to put more pesticides on the less number of bats we have to eat the insects. So this is an old article because they tell us about how many turbines. I don't remember when I cut out of the paper. At that time, they said they called them killer mills.
Killer mills.
420. That's what they called them, killer mills, MILLS. They said we had 420 wind turbines now in use in Pennsylvania, which killed more than 10,000 bats last year. That's an average of 25 bats per turbine per year. And the Nature Conservatory predicts as many as 2,900 turbines will be set up across the state in the year 2030. This is a bad time to be a bat. So people do not realize it's not all bats. The birds are being killed off. A lot of birds are being killed off, and I can't understand why the environmentalists aren't screaming about the birds and the bats being killed off.
Well, they don't care. They use this to justify their agenda, which is more government control over our lives. And
Do you remember when the Kennedy family would not allow turbines to be put up there in Massachusetts? Spoil their view.
Well, yeah, it obstructed their beautiful view of the bay. Yeah. So it's not in their backyard. But you're exactly right, Tina. I want to thank you for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views there on the complete devastation wrought by these windmills that are just slaughtering birds and bats, and it's just horrible. But that's what our 2020 presidential candidates want more of. More windmills that produce almost no energy at a massive cost, that the cost in slaughtering animals and also filling up our landfills with these used turbines and the used blades that are not biodegradable. It's just it's harming the environment. But that's the proposal that we're hearing. And when I got to this point during the CNN town hall where I just had to turn it off. because it was so nonsensical, this last statement that I'll talk about. Mayor Pete said the Syrian civil war was caused in part by climate change. By climate change. Seriously. One of the leading contenders for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He is the cause celeb in the Democratic Party. Liberals love him. He is a huge celebrity on the left. He claims that the Syrian civil war was caused in part by climate change. Think about that. Think about that. The Sunni opposition rebels, the Free Syrian Army, motivated to take out the dictator Bashar al-Assad. Why, Mayor Pete? Well, climate change. The Salafi jihadist groups there, the Al Nusra Front, and the other radical extremist Muslim jihadist terrorist groups that are fighting to take out Bashar al-Assad. Why, Mayor Pete? Well, it's climate change. Really? How about the Islamic State? How about ISIS that is fighting against Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator? Why are these radical extremist terrorist jihadist groups trying to take out the secular dictator of Syria? Climate change. That's it. That's Mayor Pete. It's absolutely nuts. It is insanity. But that's what we have in the Democratic Party today. Civil war caused by climate change. We'll take some more calls. We have Philip from Wiconisco. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Mark, you missed your calling. You're really great at this. You got to do a 7-day-a-week show.
Oh, that's a great idea, Philip. Thank you.
You got to do a 7. You'll make a bundle, too. You'll bring in every sponsor imaginable. The one thing interesting about climate change is I'm freezing, but besides that, there's something interesting. Supposedly, it's supposed to cause the tides to rise. That'll put New York and California underwater. Oh, my God, it's an act of God. All the liberals will be gone.
Well, they'll have to move inland. They'll have to move into the heartland of America.
Won't make it inland. It's an act of God. It'll be like what happened when the Egyptians, when they went across the sea and tried to get Moses, and he barred them by fire by night, and then he brought the water down on them.
Hey, by the way, remember our dear beloved President Barack Obama, and how many times and how much of his administration he focused on this whole climate change hoax, and how he was warning us about how the seas were rising, and it's going to both coasts, as you point out, are going to be underwater. Didn't he just buy a multi-million-dollar mansion on Martha's Vineyard?
Then he realizes nothing's going to happen.
he is.
I think what happened with him is this: the party put him up to that, and it was either do that or he'd be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So now remember, the Democratic presidential candidates and the Democratic Party and all of our liberal friends are saying we have 10, 11, or 12 years until climate catastrophe. The seas will rise, and we're all going to drown. That's the idea. But only California and New York, I'm telling you. But Barack Obama bought a multi-million-dollar house on Martha's Vineyard on an island in the Atlantic Ocean. His home, the territory, the ground of his home, it abuts an ocean. I mean, he is feet away from the Atlantic Ocean, yet he apparently doesn't believe all of the BS that he's been promoting since he's been running for office.
Of course he does. He's out of office now, so now he can go do what he wants to do.
Phil, thanks for calling. Appreciate those points that you raise. And Philip from Wiconisco is saying that when the oceans rise and the East Coast and the West Coast is underwater, that's going to take out a lot of our liberal friends on those coasts. That would be, of course, a horrible thing to happen, but maybe they'll move inland, and the farther inland they move, the more common sense they'll get. We'll make conservatives of our friends Barack Obama, because in 10 years his multi-million-dollar mansion is going to be underwater, right? Wrong. It's not going to happen. It's all a hoax. And the whole CNN climate change town hall was a complete hoax, as our president tweeted repeatedly during the event to remind us. I had to sit through it and endure it so that I could talk with you today about it. And I want to thank you for calling in, and thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Mark Scaringi Show. Tune in every Saturday, 1 o'clock. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Thanks for listening.